In recent years, we've seen an increasing influence of philosophical ideas, particularly speculative and metaphysical philosophy, being applied in areas like leadership development programs, L&D. While philosophy offers intriguing and thought-provoking ideas, its nature is not grounded in empirical fact. Philosophy is fundamentally a collection of interpretations, explorations, and rational deductions, not scientific truths. This is important to recognize, especially when such speculative thought is used to shape leadership or relationship guidance, as it risks introducing problematic ideologies that can have detrimental consequences. Philosophy is not fact. It's speculative at its core. Philosophy is speculative in nature. Philosophers ask profound questions about existence, consciousness, ethics, and reality. But their conclusions remain rooted in subjective reasoning rather than empirical evidence. Unlike scientific models, which undergo rigorous testing and validation, philosophical ideas are based on abstract reasoning, logic, and metaphysical concepts. This is what makes philosophy such a valuable tool for exploring the human experience, but it's also why it becomes problematic when treated as hard fact. For example, Ken Wilber's integral theory, which forms the foundation of many modern leadership frameworks, attempts to integrate psychology, spirituality, and developmental models into a single overarching framework. However, it's not grounded in scientific research. Wilber's speculative thinking makes bold claims about the nature of consciousness and human development, yet lacks the empirical evidence that would validate its application in fields like leadership or personal growth. When speculative philosophy is taken as a factual basis for building an L&D program, this introduces a significant risk. The framework may not have real-world relevance or produce desired outcomes. Instead, it can impose a rigid set of ideas that don't align with the complexities of leadership, interpersonal relationships, or organizational dynamics. Cult-like ideology in leadership programs creating an L&D program based on philosophical musings, particularly those of thinkers like Wilber, can easily to the emergence of cult-like ideologies in the workplace. When a leadership program revolves around speculative ideas in the workplace, when a leadership program revolves around speculative ideas, it often encourages individuals to adopt specific beliefs or frameworks without critical examination. This is especially dangerous when participants are told that they are part of an elite or special group, as seen in some leadership models that promise participants they are advancing to a new level of consciousness or leadership awareness. This mirrors the tactics used by cults, which often elevate members by telling them they are part of an exclusive or enlightened group. In a professional context, such strategies can create dependence on the leadership program and a sense of intellectual superiority, discouraging critical thinking. When high IQ individuals, for example, are told they are part of a fifth quadrant or some other exclusive leadership category, it appeals to their sense of intellect and uniqueness, drawing them into a belief system that lacks empirical grounding. This kind of manipulation is not only unethical, but it also leads to the risk of creating groupthink and detachment from reality. A key characteristic of cult-like behavior is isolating individuals from outside perspectives and convincing them that the framework they've been introduced to is the only path to true enlightenment or progress. In a leadership program based on speculative philosophy, this can mean that participants dismiss alternative leadership approaches, relying solely on the untested framework they've been given. The background of philosophers and their influence, another crucial aspect to consider, is the philosopher's background. Ken Wilber, for instance, has been influenced by numerous spiritual gurus throughout his life. While his ideas are appealing to many who are drawn to spiritual or mystical thinking, they become highly questionable when positioned as the foundation for leadership development. If the person behind the philosophy has consistently followed speculative, spiritual, or mystical ideas, it stands to reason that their leadership framework will also be influenced by those same ideologies. This is why the background of the thinker must be scrutinized before accepting their views as a basis for professional or leadership development. A leadership program should be about fostering practical, evidence-based skills, not a set of speculative spiritual beliefs masquerading as universal truths. Imagine teaching religion in the workplace to people who may be atheists or agnostics. It's inappropriate. intrusive, and often leads to discomfort or disengagement. Similarly, applying a metaphysical framework to leadership development, especially in a secular or scientific workplace, is unlikely to resonate with all participants, creating unnecessary friction and disillusionment. Relationships are not formulas, and neither is leadership philosophical frameworks like Wilber's four-quadrant model or even tools like the Enneagram attempt to create formulas or categories that quantify human experience. However, relationships, whether personal or professional, are far too complex to be reduced to a formula. The nature of relationships requires adaptability, empathy, communication, and emotional intelligence. When you try to impose rigid frameworks on something as dynamic as human interaction, you miss the nuances and create limitations where flexibility is required. In relationships and leadership alike, there is no one-size-fits-all model. Applying a speculative philosophical model in these areas often leads to oversimplification, where real emotions, needs, and circumstances are sidelined in favor of adhering to abstract rules. As a result, it can cause more harm than good, especially if participants feel constrained or pressured to fit into predetermined categories rather than addressing their unique situations. While philosophy is an important tool for intellectual exploration, it should not be treated as fact, especially when creating leadership development programs. Speculative thought, no matter how profound or insightful, lacks the empirical foundation necessary to guide real-world decision-making and leadership. When speculative philosophy, such as Ken Wilber's integral theory, is introduced into professional settings, it runs the risk of creating cult-like ideologies that stifle critical thinking and create division. Ultimately, relationships, whether personal or professional, are dynamic, evolving, and deeply personal. They cannot be reduced to speculative models or philosophical frameworks. Leadership development should be grounded in evidence-based practices that foster practical skills, emotional intelligence, and adaptability, rather than abstract spiritual concepts. Only then can true growth, both individually and collectively, be achieved.